Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is going to be a massive, massive failure. And it seems like DC is just continuing to shovel money into this film. A new report says it underwent a third set of reshoots due to issues with, quote, story clarity. So all about the Flash reshoots and everything like that. Well, it looks like Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is to have a number of them as well. So this new report from the Hollywood Reporter notes that Aquaman and Lost Kingdom has undergone 3 sets of reshoots since it originally finished principal photography in January 2022. The report notes the film underwent 2 reshoots between the summer of 2022 and the beginning of 2023 after it received, quote, uninspiring test screenings. Now, even after these 2 reshoots, the film received a third set in the middle of June that was shot in New Zealand, reportedly over the course of 4 days, despite being approved for 5 days. Boris Kidd at the Hollywood Reporter notes this third round of reshoots, quote, is almost an unprecedented number, even for a movie of this scale. Like, just absolutely crazy that they're doing a third set of reshoots. Wild. They're just blowing money doing these reshoots. So, while it's unclear what exactly the issue is with the film, Kit did say, one insider said the issue of story clarity has been an ongoing concern. So, they've done all these reshoots and still haven't figured out how to figure out their issue of story clarity. If you're having problems like communicating what your story is about in the film, like that's a disaster. That should have been something that was fixed in the script writing process. But as we know from James Gunn, a lot of these films go to production without even having finished scripts, or they're absolutely just winging things and not having like fully fleshed out scripts, and they're just kind of doing like just massive amounts of shoots and then trying to cobble it together in editing. And that's why these films are just going having absolutely massive budgets. And then they're adding on top of that these reshoots because they can't cobble it together in the editing room. So we did have some actual information from James Wan, the director of the film, when he previously told the Hollywood Reporter that, quote, he had to make adjustments all along the way in order for the film to adapt to the new leadership at DC Studios and their vision for the future of the DC universe. So he was basically implying that what James Gunn and Peter Safran and their vision with Superman Legacy and all of that, they were actually trying to adapt to that with Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. So, which is kind of weird. Like, honestly, they shouldn't have done this because now you're just overriding costs, right? You're creating cost overruns. Just don't make any changes, and you should have just done a hard reboot with Superman Legacy. And then that should have been announced after Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom was already in theaters, so people are still kind of like thinking that this is the way it's going to go. And then you announce you're doing this hard reboot. Instead, DC and Warner Brothers was absolutely idiotic. They announced this whole change back in October or whatever last year. Definitely by December, I know it had been announced. And then you get the new slate in January, and it's like, well, we're killing off Shazam, we're killing off Flash, we're killing off Blue Beetle, and we're killing off Aquaman because no one really cares about those films anymore because you've told us that the stories that they were telling no longer apply because you're going to be telling new stories with new characters, new filmmakers, etc., etc. And you're rebooting. You literally said that you were going to reset with the Flash. So whatever story you're telling here isn't important to the longer form narrative you're telling in this DC universe you're trying to create. Now, I think if you were just going to be doing a solo Superman film, I think you wouldn't have had that issue. But you said you're creating a whole new DC universe, so that led to this issue. But Juan said, the DCU has been through lots of different versions, and one of the things that was challenging about this film was keeping track of what's going on. Yeah, I can imagine trying to figure out what in the world is happening would be an issue, because you have rumors about Ben Affleck maybe coming back and doing his movie with Deathstroke. Then he was out, and then you're doing the James Gunn thing, and then so there's lots of different things that were changing and moving parts and everything like that. You had Henry Cavill coming back with Black Adam and setting up that. Obviously, there's probably going to be a showdown with Shazam as well, and like there's all of these things happening. Gunn comes in, changes it all. You got to fix that. So, yeah, I can say that would be very confusing and lead to like, well, what do I got to do now? I got to change this. This doesn't add up anymore. And obviously, that would be story clarity, right? So I think even Juan here is saying that there's issues with story clarity. So, but then he went on and said that his film wasn't really connected. So he just said that he had all these issues of all these things problems coming to him because everything is changing within the DCU. But then he says it's not really a concern because it's not connected. So speaking out of both sides of your mouth here, James Wan. He says, fortunately, the Aquaman universe is pretty far removed from the rest of the world. We're going to many different underwater kingdoms and that are not necessarily related to what's happening with the other movies and characters, so we're standalone in that respect. So I can just tell my story on its own without being affected too much. But at the same time, I have to be mindful of what's been happening. Again, talking out of both sides. Like, you can tell your own story, but then you said you need to be mindful. Well, which one is it? Is it you actually have to figure out what the other movies are doing and stuff like that and how it fits into your film? Or can you just tell your standalone story? Again, the huge problem here with what's going on. It seems like mismanagement from the top. As for what we can expect from the film, he said, I think people are going to be excited to see that this movie is quite different from the first movie in terms of tone. It's a little bit more serious, and we're dealing with issues like climate change. I like the first part. I like serious. I think Aquaman is supposed to be a very serious character. I always, the best stories I think are the ones where it's, he's basically heavy is the head that wears the crown. He's dealing with a lot of political intrigue. There's a lot of palace intrigue. He's trying to manage all the different factions that he's dealing with. And then obviously that leads into like big action sequences. You can have investigations. You can have espionage. There's lots of things that you can do there. Really interesting. I don't like the thing about climate change. I think that that's overdone. I don't want to be lectured on that stuff. Climate change to me is just a hot button political thing, and I'm just not really interested in seeing that, especially when it's just used to bludgeon people. And it's just, and usually the people that are doing the bludgeoning are hypocrites in any ways. So he says, we're not afraid to lean into that in a big way. That's super concerning. Big way on climate change. Like, no. Because the Aquaman comic book, even way back when, has always been environmentally conscious. See, there's a difference between being environmentally conscious and like conservation and everything like that and climate change activism. I think those are two vastly different things. And the one is just like insufferable. Whereas, like, obviously, conservation, keeping the ocean clean, keeping trash out of the ocean, that's obviously an admirable thing to do. And we should strive to do that. He's always been someone who's fought to keep the ocean clean, and it feels more relevant in the world that we're living in today. So this movie has something to talk about, but it's still a fun action fantasy movie. So that is the update on Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. I think this film is going to be another box office bomb for DC, and I think it's of their own making. First off, with an absolutely, sounds like terrible political allegory, the fact that they were constantly doing reshoots, inflating the budget, and the fact that they basically said that this film no longer matters because of the James Gunn DC Universe launch.